Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a video on the auxiliary verbs or auxiliaries. They're also commonly known as helping verbs. As you can see here, we've written all the different affirmative forms and here are the different uses of auxiliary verbs. So let's start off with the compound tenses. In order to create a compound tense, I will need my auxiliary to help the main verb indicate the subject's involvement in the action. So I'm going to use, for example, the compound tense I'm going to use is, let's say, the past perfect continuous, because I'll need lots of auxiliaries there. So the past perfect continuous of learn. So past, so I'm just going to use my auxiliary have. He had. Perfect continuous. He had been learning. So I'm not only going to use this auxiliary, but also this auxiliary here. So he had been learning. He had been learning. Learning is my main verb in the present participle. So it's preceded by two auxiliaries, had and been. So that is one example of a compound tense. Now let's use a less complex tense. Let's say, for example, the present continuous. Now in order to create a present continuous, I need an auxiliary to be. Let's use the first person singular. I am learning. So I need this auxiliary to precede the main verb, learn, in this case, in the present participle. I am learning creates the present continuous. So have a quick review of your compound tenses if that wasn't very clear. But just in the meantime, focus on the various forms of our auxiliary verbs. Now, why negative statements and questions? We're going to use, depending on the tense, we're going to use various auxiliaries. Now, let's start with this particular auxiliary to do. If I want to make a question or create a negative statement in the simple present, I'm going to rely on these two forms, do and does. Does she speak English? Question. Does she speak English? I need the auxiliary, my subject, and the bare infinitive of my main verb, speak. Does she speak? And for a negative statement, I could say, he doesn't, so don't forget to add your not here, he doesn't speak German, for example, is my negative statement. So as you can see, we need this with the inflection showing it's the third person singular. She or he does not speak German. Okay, so those are the three first examples of use. The fourth one is the passive voice. Now, this is just an introduction to auxiliary, so don't forget to watch the full explanation of the passive voice in another video. In the meantime, let's just remember that in order to create the passive voice, we need the auxiliary be. So for example, an example of the passive voice would be, this house was built in the 1950s. Now, was is my auxiliary. It is followed by a past participle. The main verb is in the past participle, built, and was built gives me my passive voice statement. Another example could be, I was told this morning is another passive voice statement. Was is my auxiliary, told is the past participle of my main verb, to tell. I was told this morning. Okay? And one that I haven't mentioned quite yet is the last form here, will. Now, will is an auxiliary verb and a modal verb, so that means that I should have written more modal verbs here, but I'm going to let you watch another video on modal verbs to fully understand them. In the meantime, this particular auxiliary helps me create the future tenses. So let's say the simple, the future simple. For example, I will learn. I will learn. I use the auxiliary followed by a bare infinitive. That creates a simple future or future simple. I will learn. But I can also rely on various auxiliaries simultaneously to create perfect or continuous tenses. For example, let's do a future perfect. I will have learned. So here I need two auxiliaries followed by my main verb, In this case, it's in the past participle. I will have learned is my future perfect. And if I want a future perfect continuous, I'll use a different auxiliary. I'll use this one first. I will have been, so I'm going to use another one, so that's 3 auxiliaries for this tense, and then my main verb is learn, in this case in the ing form, in the present participle. I will have been learning is the future perfect continuous or future perfect progressive, depending on what term you prefer. Okay, so those are many different examples on how to use these verbs to assist main verbs and create different scenarios, different tenses, different viewpoints also. Okay, now a few hints here for you in the classroom, whether you're a student or a teacher. Don't forget that most of these verbs can be used alone, not just assisting a main verb. They can be main verbs themselves. In that case, they're called full verbs. Okay, so for example, I can say, I do sports. I do sports. Do shows me the action. It's not assisting a main verb. So that is the full verb or using do as a full verb. That is an example. I do sports. If I say I am English, that is also the full verb of to be. And if I say I have siblings, that is also using that verb as a full verb and not as an auxiliary. Okay, now don't forget that I've only written the affirmative forms or positive forms, so practice the negative forms also. A thorough tense review is necessary at this point. Coming back to this video after that review is a recommendation. And finally, don't forget that this chapter is linked in many ways to these other videos, these other chapters: question tags, passive voice, modal verbs, and make-do expressions. Although that isn't grammar, it's more to do with lexis, with vocabulary. These collocations, expressions with make, expressions with do, they're quite confusing for learners. So you might want to review do as an auxiliary, but also in expressions as a full verb. Thank you for today.